The Manhattan Project was basically the beginning of the nuclear age. One reason why the Manhattan Project, which was a project started by the United States to develop the first atomic bomb, began was because the scientific community learned that the Germans had discovered how to split a uranium atom. This led to widespread worry that they might develop a weapon of proportions that had not been seen before, and those fears were not misplaced. Albert Einstein, who fled the German nation and came to the United States, uh, basically begged President Roosevelt to begin to try to create a nuclear bomb. At the beginning, they were not really gung ho for the idea, but once the concept was proven, the funding really began to kick in for it. And the project to create this nuclear bomb eventually became known as the Manhattan Project. There was rigorous experimentation because if something went wrong at any point in the explosion of the uranium bomb, it could be devastating. And they also had to prove the concept throughout the production of the atomic bomb, because this was something that was being done for the first time. And throughout this experimentation, it was extremely important that neither the Germans nor the Japanese discovered the Manhattan Project, because the U.S. wanted to be the only one that had this technology. There were about 120,000 people employed under the Manhattan Project, but only a few people actually even knew what it was about. In fact, the man who was vice president at the time, Truman, did not even know about the Manhattan Project until the death of Roosevelt, upon which Vice President Truman became President Truman. And they would use different kinds of code words, like the Trinity site in Mexico, which was the place where they did a lot of testing. And the events of what happened here were kept highly guarded, and even the vice presidents did not even know what was taking place. Some of the effects and costs of developing the nuclear bomb were not just monetary. Of course, the Manhattan Project did end up costing the taxpayers about $2 billion by the time everything was said and done. And it did employ a lot of Americans. However, it led to an era known as the Cold War, which wasn't really a war. It was basically escalation towards a potential nuclear war. And this took a great societal cost because people were really scared. It did affect the economy, because if people are worried about, what's going to happen a week from now, that if they think they might get blown up by a nuclear bomb, they're not going to, be as engaged in the economy as they could be. And the people who were kind of preparing for this nuclear war were called preppers. And these people still exist today, not so much in the nuclear sense, but maybe like, say, the government falling, they want to be prepared for anything that might happen. So there were a lot of nuclear bombs that were developed by the U.S. and the USSR, who those were kind of the two main figureheads of the Cold War. Each side wanted to have the most amount of atomic bombs and the highest, most powerful atomic bombs. So it just led to this escalation of who could have the greatest scientific developments as far as bombs go. And the only thing preventing all-out nuclear war from happening was something called mutually assured destruction, or annihilation. And basically, the idea is that if the U.S. bombs Russia, Russia's going to send all their nukes, and then the U.S. is going to be done. So like, it's not worth it really to bomb if you're nuclear to send the nuclear bombs if you know you're going to be blown up anyways. So, and this led to eventually the Cuban embargo because the USSR was real big buddies with Cuba, and since Cuba is really close to the US, we were kind of afraid of potentially nuclear warheads being launched from Cuba. And you can see pictures of what was a fallout shelter, Cold War era, where people might have gone to escape the nuclear fallout. And this is another example. You can see they've got canned food, a radio, and this was real typical of the Cold War era as far as fear goes. And that's a source I used for a lot of my information.